This is Evolutionary Radio. This is your host, Trevor Kouritzin. As always, we are bringing you the brightest minds in the health and fitness industry. My co-host, Steve Smee, is joining me as always.
Well, I wouldn't call myself one of the brighter minds, but I am on the podcast. We have another special guest, Coach Paul Carter, I believe. Gentlemen, how you doing, my friend?
I'm good, brother. Thanks for having me on.
So, Paul, I had a lot of people request me to book you. I'm glad you came on the show. For our listeners who don't know you, give us your background. What got you interested in lifting weights in the first place? How long you've been lifting weights? How did this all start for you?
That's a pretty funny story, actually. When I was 14 years old, I actually wanted to go out to Oregon. I was living in Mississippi at the time, and for those that are geographically challenged, it's really far away. And I wanted to take a certain kind of martial arts, and clearly at the time when I was 14, I'm 43 now, so if anybody wants to date me. So I ended up buying this magazine, this martial arts magazine, and found this guy out in Oregon that taught this specific kind of martial art, and I wanted to go take it. So I had been playing the drums for a long time, and I had this drum set that I actually ended up pawning and got a few $100 and bought a Greyhound bus ticket and jumped on it and spent 4 days on a Greyhound bus going out from Mississippi to Oregon. And when I got out there, I ended up living with his mother and father, and they were pretty well off. They had like a 4-story house, literally, and I had like the top floor. And it was like day one of being there, and my instructor wakes me up and says, "Hey, this is, we're going to train. We're going to go to the gym and train." And that was how I actually got started into lifting. And he did like the old Arnold routine, but it was kind of a mishmash of it. So we'd do like chest in the morning and literally go eat lunch and come back and do like back after that for like an hour each. And I remember that it was the second or third day that I woke up and I was so sore, I was literally like paralyzed. I couldn't move. Like him and his mom had to help me out of the bed and put me in like a tub of hot water just so I could get some mobility back going. And I hated it. I absolutely hated it. He had this Toyota truck that was jacked up. And so I had to pull myself up into the truck every day. And it was the most sore I'd ever been in my life. And I hated it with a passion. But about 3 weeks in, or about a month in, I was in the kitchen one. And this is completely true. This is the moment I knew I would lift weights forever. I was in the kitchen, and his mom she was always kind of roughhousing with me. She was really cool. And she got like in a fighting stance, like she was going to punch me. And I remember I flexed, and I actually saw a muscle on my body. I saw my bicep for the first time ever. And I was like, that's really cool. I actually like this whole weightlifting thing. And that was it. That was like the moment that it kind of stuck with me. So I was like 97 pounds. And I was like 2 feet tall. I was really, really tiny. I mean, everybody's a shrimp at 14 years old. But that was my inception into lifting.
So what are your stats now, Paul? Height, weight, body fat, all that good stuff. And where are you living now?
I live in Kansas City right now, and most of the time I'm 5'11". I generally walk around close to 240, so I'm about 238 right now. I like long walks on the beach, have hazel eyes. I like a good Cabernet.
Yeah. So if anyone's interested in dating, go on his Instagram and definitely hit him up. I'm not sure.
Paul, are you single? I can be your matchmaker.
I currently do have a lady.
Okay, well, now all of our female listeners just stop us.
All our 5 female listeners logged off now. But yeah, you guys go on his Instagram page. He's a big motherfucker. And so what are you doing now in the fitness industry? Is this how are you making your living fully in the fitness industry, or do you have like a real job and you just kind of do this for extra income?
I was a computer engineer for 15 years when I got out of the military, and that was what I did professionally for the longest time. And I get a lot of people that ask me, like, how did you get where you are? What did you do? Whatever. And it was kind of by accident in a kind of roundabout sort of way. I actually figured out about 8 years ago that I really loved writing, and I wrote a novel that I never got published. And I started a blog one day, and it wasn't even really open. Like, nobody was viewing it, but I started writing training articles just for me because I really loved writing, and I wanted to write about training and stuff. And I'm friends with Jim Wendler, and at the time, Jim was developing 531. He was still in the process of writing the first 531 book, which has gone on to sell like 11 billion copies. And Jim wanted to see like what I was writing, so I would send him like what I was writing. He's like, "Dude, this is awesome." He's like, "Do you want Elite FTS to like publish this?" And I was like, "No." I was scared to death, and I was scared to death of anybody reading it because like nobody. The only people that had read anything I wrote at that point was my kids. When I used to read them chapters out of the book that I had written. And so Jim kind of stayed after me, and they ended up publishing it. And like overnight, like the blog blew up, and Jim comes back and he's like, "Hey, they want you to write more." So I ended up writing quite a few articles for Elite FTS at the time. And I was competing in powerlifting, so I was writing a lot about just pure strength training at that time. And then I decided I wanted to write some little training books, and then those did well. And I just kind of kept growing from there, and I stayed after it, and refined my writing, and I ended up writing for T Nation, and then I kept writing for them, and now I'm still writing for T Nation, and I'm writing for bodybuilder.com, and so I've written for Muscle and Fitness, I've written for Flex, I've written for pretty much every major publication there is at this point. And I still really love writing, and I still love giving out information and helping people in terms of that kind of stuff. So yeah, I mean, this is pretty much what I do. I have a lot of clients that I help online. Like I said, I write for a lot of publications. I'm involved as a distributor for exogenous ketones and stuff like that. So I mean, I have quite a few different things that I dabble in on the daily.
One thing a lot of people don't realize is how big of a website T Nation is. If you look at like the search engine optimization analytics, it's massive. I'd say it's bigger than bodybuilding.com.
Yeah, I mean, that's it. That's the thing, is that bodybuilding.com has about, I think it's like 4 or 5 times as many quote unquote followers. But as far as reputation goes, most people tend to know more about solid training advice or articles or that kind of thing from T Nation. I think that tends to be the reputation, I think.
So Paul, you're obviously a really smart guy. I mean, you've been writing articles for years. You've got the physique to back it up. I had probably 30 DMs for questions for you. I could summarize probably 20 of them into this. Okay. You see so many people at the gym. They're dedicated. They're there 5 or 6 days per week. They're very, very dedicated. They're if whatever their 5-day schedule is, they go every 5 days per week. They don't take weeks off. They're consistent, but they don't see results. And this is like 95% of people at the gym. What are they doing wrong?
There's a myriad of problems with people who don't see results. And one of the things that I was really lucky in when I was coming up, when I was younger, that I don't feel like that I see a lot of in guys that are struggling and walk into the gym and have the same physique year in and year out, right? I mean, that's what they're talking about. They go in and they're either trying to grow or get stronger, and then they're struggling for a long period of time. And one of the things that was different from when I was coming up was we didn't have the internet, right? You bought magazines or you bought books. And if you bought a magazine and there was a program in it, you didn't get to ask 4,000 questions. You had to basically go into the gym, do that program, and you either did it to the letter or maybe you massaged some parts of it to kind of fit what you had liked from your years of experience. But for the most part, we went in and you put your head down and you went to work. Nobody was taking selfies in the gym. People weren't doing videos and stuff because, I mean, you wore a fanny pack and put a tape player in the fanny pack and put your headphones on. Like, we didn't have, all the the bells and whistles that we have now. And I think that overall there's probably been a bit of a loss in kind of the mental intensity and focus that I see from a lot of guys, because I was into bodybuilding when I first got in, and it was during a time in the 90s where bodybuilding was very hardcore. The mentality of it was very hardcore. Dorian Yates was in his prime at that time, right? And everybody followed suit. So everything was kind of centered around training your ass off really hard and eating a lot of high quality food. And at the end of the day, what it's going to come back to is you're going to have to be patient and just really train your balls off on a really consistent basis for a long time. I mean, I'm always open about this. I was natural for 20 years. And I mean, I had a post I even put up about it. I mean, I was 256 to 258 pounds, completely natural. And I had done dog crap training for 3 years nonstop at one point, with taking very little breaks. But the intensity that I used in my training was off the charts at that time. I don't train like that anymore because, number one, I don't want to, but I also don't have to because I've really paid my dues over the course of 30 years of training. And I still and I remember Dante, you guys know who Dante Trudell is, right?
Oh yeah, I'm a big fan. Yeah. I read the Cycles for Pennies, man. Like the original.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome. Cycles for Pennies. Yeah, and I was on the intense muscle boards back in the day.
Paul, you want to know who the next guest I booked?
Who?
Ken Skip Hill.
Oh, that's awesome. I love Ken.
He's on Monday.
So Ken's a great guy. Yeah, that was back in the day. That was back when Shelby Starnes was just like a regular guy on the intense muscle boards, and a lot of guys that people really know now. We were just posting stuff back then. One of the movements a lot of people don't realize that Dante even talks about now is the PJR pullovers for triceps.
I know all this stuff, man. I was on the intense muscle forums when Dusty was
okay. Well, I was PJR. I was the one that actually, he always credits me for that. So that's my little claim to fame for dog crap stuff. But I did dog crap training for 3 years at one point straight with taking very little breaks, and my diet was meticulous. Now, I ate a lot of food, but I wasn't eating junk. And I think for a lot of these guys, when I talk to them, it's the same story. They don't eat enough. They don't train hard enough. They don't recover well enough. And their focus isn't what it should be for the time that they're in the gym. And that's really, I think, a lot of what it boils down to. The other conglomerate of people that I see these days, and I see this all the time because I'm pretty good friends with a lot of guys that do a lot of high-level research and get studies published and stuff. And it's all these guys, and they're like debating some really some nuances of training that, in the grand scheme of things, really aren't that important. They sit there and debate like whether this control group had this or that in their study, and what, the subjects that were selected. And I remember it was in one of Brad Schoenfeld's discussions one day, and I finally piped up and I was like, why don't you guys actually go just try it for once instead of bitching about it on the internet? And that's it seems like there's there's a couple of different, I think, sections of people we deal with. That's the people that do go in and train really hard and eat really well and understand that it just takes time and patience, and it's just gonna be a bit of a grind. And then there's the people that think they're training really hard but aren't. I had some guys come out and train with me, I think it was a couple months ago, and they met me out. One of them I actually worked with online, and I put them through, and I trained with them. They trained with me, and I put them through a chest, shoulders, and triceps workout. And I don't train anywhere near as hard now as I used to, and they were destroyed after. And it's not because they're lazy, it's because they don't understand that level of intensity. With John Meadows and I were in Australia, and we were teaching people out there, like we literally would do like 3-hour back workouts. And like, that's probably not needed, because I remember being kind of pissed off at John at one point, being like, okay, we're not doing another exercise. Like we've been in here forever. But I think a lot of guys, could go back and take a page out of that book from the mentality of guys back in the 90s who went in and just trained your ass off. And you didn't ask questions like, well, can a natty guy use this route? Look, man, like people didn't talk openly about gear use back in the 90s. Like, they didn't. And you didn't have a natty routine or a gear routine or whatever. You just took a routine and you went in and made it work for you. And then you ate a shitload of food. I remember it was the summer when I was 17, I've written about this a lot, having days where I just hurt from eating all day. Eating was a chore. And if you're actually really trying to grow, and eating doesn't feel like a job, you're probably not eating enough.
Where did you say that you're now, Paul? What part of the country?
I'm currently in Kansas City.
Oh yeah, you said Kansas City. See, I'm surprised about your viewpoint, because I would think people in that part of the country were vast majority were overweight, even the people in gyms. Am I wrong?
Well, if we're talking about guys that are skinny and can't grow.
No, but I'm saying I think most people are just fat and they just go to the gym and just live. So I want to piggyback, because I do my homework on our guests always. So I know a lot about you, probably more than, a lot of other people. So I always do my homework on guests leading up to these podcasts, by the way. And I've read your articles, and I like something you said in one of your articles. And this needs to be said a lot more, because we get into this whole, YouTube, social media, cookie cutter bullshit, where people like to parrot the bullshit diets that are designed for pro bodybuilders. So one of your articles, you actually say that's a mistake. You say people eat like a pro bodybuilder. And I see that in my gym. These same guys have been lifting they're there every day. When I walk in, they're there. When I leave, they're still working out. But they look like shit. They have guts. They're wearing those tight shirts and their guts are hanging over. I'm like, and they keep getting fatter and fatter. So I feel like they are overeating. They're eating because they think that they're supposed to follow what Ronnie Coleman eats, but they don't understand. They don't have the genetics. They're not taking, the HGH. They're not taking drugs. They're not taking all the shit. And, and they're just going to get fat. So they're not like, what's the point of getting strong if you can't even see your muscles? That's the concept I don't get. So you actually make a good point, because you say that too many people, they like to just copy what bodybuilders eat. They'll see a YouTube video of Jay Cutler walking around the grocery store buying like 10 things of frozen fish, and they try to copy that. So isn't that one of the big mistakes though that people are making?
Yeah, because here's the thing, and I was actually going to do a video about this one day, and I just didn't get around to it. And number one, so we'll drill back a little bit. Before you ever do a mass building diet, or you want to add mass, you need to be lean first. Okay, so I've hit on this a lot. So if you're not lean, and I mean like sub 10%, more like probably 7 or 8%. If you're not 7 or 8%, you really don't have much business doing a quote unquote mass building diet, for a myriad of reasons. And number one is because if you're going to be eating, in a hypercaloric state, an excess amount of calories coming in, then you want to have really good nutrient partitioning going on. You want to be very insulin sensitive. And when the fatter that you get, the easier it is to accumulate more body fat. Fat is estrogenic. Fat cells are estrogenic, so you don't have a very good physiological environment for building muscle. You tend to get fatter. You tend to have more inflammation. High degree of low-grade chronic inflammation tends to, make you more insulin resistant. So the truth is that most guys would behoove themselves to get really lean first, and then use that as the springboard for going into a mass gaining phase. But yeah, a lot of these guys, man, they're on like that forever bulk diet, and they just look like crap, year round. And a big part of that a lot of people don't understand, that I believe, just my opinion about this, is that those guys, they don't see themselves for how they are. And I went through the same thing when I decided to get my fat ass in shape after 10 years of powerlifting, and that I thought I looked quote unquote pretty good. And then when I started coming down in weight, I was actually working with a guy named Trevor Cashew, who's an unbelievable at what he does. He's a great nutritionist. Everybody should look him up. And Trevor was the guy I went to because I just wanted some accountability at first. And every time I would send Trevor pics in, I would think I'm looking pretty good. He'd say, "You're still a fat ass." And he did this forever. Like even to the point when I did actually get pretty lean. Trevor, I remember him telling me, because I came down from almost 290, and Trevor said, you're going to need to be 198 before you're lean. And that pissed me off to no end. I was like, I will never be 198 pounds. And when I stepped on stage for a bodybuilding show, I was 225, probably 4 or 5% body fat. So I got to rub that in his face. But Trevor actually came at me and he said, I only told you that to keep you focused. But a lot of these guys that are big and fat like that, and they're still bulking, they don't really, they suffer a bit from body dysmorphia. They constantly wake up and they freak out if they lose a little bit of weight or whatever. You have talked to guys like this, right? They're stuck in that no man's land of whether they should bulk or cut, like they're in high school or some shit. And
I think that is true. But I also think too, they're so caught up in what Jerry Ward and these guys on YouTube tell them to do, which is eat 8 meals a day. You got to eat chicken, brown rice, broccoli, 8 meals a day, or you're not going to grow muscle. So they just say, well, I'm doing what he's telling me to do. Well, I'm like 25% body fat and my insulin levels are sky high and I can't, I can't get out of it.
Well,
and
there's a lot of factors a lot of guys don't want to come to terms with. Number one, and I've written this, and T-Nation has put this out quite a few times, even in a meme. Most guys, when they decide to get in shape, they think they're going to pull off 20 pounds and look like an Adonis. And they don't realize that more times than not, it's more like 50, 60, or potentially 70 pounds that they have to lose before they actually look really good. And, again, I went through the same thing. And I was 275 to 290, and I thought I have all this muscle. And I actually did. You step on stage at 225, you're carrying a good amount of muscle. But I thought the same thing. Well, I'll pill down to 260 or 250 and I'll look awesome. And I didn't. And a lot of these guys, they don't understand when you undergo that real process of getting your fat ass in shape, you're probably going to have to peel off a lot of fat. You don't carry as much muscle as you think you do. Not if you decide to get really, really lean. You just really don't. Pro bodybuilders do, but they're pro bodybuilders because they have elite level genetics and respond to drugs better than everybody else. So, but the majority of guys, they don't carry as much muscle as they think they do. And it would really behoove them to stop believing the bullshit that you got to eat 6 times a day or 7 times a day or 8 times a day, whatever. The other part that I want to touch on there was if you've been training really hard and intelligently for a decade, and let's say you're natural, because there's plenty of natural guys, out there still, and they're like, what I got to do? Well, if you're natural and you've been training for 10 years hard and eating correctly, you've built all the muscle you're ever going to build. That's the absolute rock solid truth, whether a guy likes it or not. 10 years, probably 7, to be honest. 7 to 10 years after 7 to 10 years of really hard, intelligent training and really intelligent eating, you've built about as much muscle as you're ever going to build.
You just described me to a T, because I'm in my late 30s, and that's exactly what I did. I built muscle, and in the last 2 years, I've just cut down 35 pounds, and I look absolutely shredded and huge. I look the best I've ever looked in my life. My strength is down, but I look absolutely amazing, and I'm ripped. So you just perfectly described exactly me to a T. That's beautiful. I love that.
Yeah, and that's the that's the process. Any guy that if he starts young enough, you're lucky if you start young enough to get those years to really build your foundation. Because if you're really skinny, what a lot of guys don't realize is being skinny is a great place to start at, because you can just power shovel food all day long and train. And you don't really have to worry so much about, accumulating a lot of body fat. So it's a great place to really start if you're really skinny. I was always jealous later of really skinny guys because I gained mass really fast, but I would also gain fat in kind of a proportion. I wasn't a guy that gained fat. I was pretty athletic most of my life. So, but getting super lean required a lot of work by me. And I think the guys that are lean naturally, even if they're a bit skinny, they're the ones that really have it better, because they tend to have better nutrient partitioning. They tend to not accumulate a lot of fat. Those guys have it a little bit better. They always think the thicker guys, they're like, well, I just like to have all that extra muscle. Dude, I would much rather look sexy at the beach and be like, 198 than be, 265 or 270 anymore, but be carrying, 25, 30% body fat. That's, especially at my age now where really health and wellness is the biggest factor that I take into account anymore. But I don't really have to, people don't believe how little I eat anymore to still walk around at almost 240. And I just, it's 30 years of training and eating, and you create that set point that your body, just holds on to. So it's not really that hard. I had that same talk with John Meadows, and John's like, sometimes he doesn't eat but 100 grams of protein in a day for weeks on end, and he still stays, huge and ripped. So
I know Trevor wants to get in, but when I was at my biggest and I was going on the trend pretty hard, I wasn't like using a ton of it, but let me tell you something. I used to have to carry around glycogen pills because if I didn't eat something like every hour or two, I would like get the shakes and all that shit. And now, like you said, I can just go the whole day without food and it doesn't fucking bother me. I can go work out without food. I can work out fasted. So what you're saying is absolutely true. But you young guys have to build a base. I can't stand 20 and 25-year-olds hopping on steroids. We just had a guy in the forum say he's on trend and he's only 21. I'm like, dude, what the fuck are you doing? You got to build that base, and it takes years to do that. Then once you get into your late 30s, then you can start worrying about like molding your body. Yeah.
Here's the other part that a lot of guys don't get about that is like when you stay natural for especially like your first decade, you have to really learn how to train and eat properly. And that benefits you if you decide to get on gear later, so much more. But if you get on gear young before you kind of, actualize that natural potential, then when you get hit a plateau, then everything and I've seen this forever. Guys start looking at, well, what's my next drug cycle? Instead of figuring out how can I make these movements more efficient? How can I train harder? What does my diet need to be changed to in order to get better results? And those things are still your foundation. Going back to Dante, I remember he had this great post one time, and he said, if I stuck you on a deserted island and said, you have 1 year, and I'm just going to give you a replacement dose of test, for the week. And you have 1 year to put on 20 pounds of pure muscle. And you have all the foods you want, but you can't come off the island, right? Or something like that. But basically, you would have to figure out how to eat and train to gain that 20 pounds of muscle, because you're not going to be getting it from, an exogenous drug source. So that's what guys that's the mentality they need to embrace if they really want to grow, is take the minimum amount, if they're taking drugs, the minimum amount for the maximum results, and then maximize your training and nutrition efficiency. That's where it's all at. When I took over Fred Small's training several years ago, he had hit stage, it was like he was 218 pounds at that time. And when he stepped on stage and was for the Indy Pro Show, he was right at 240. And that was, that's 4 years, but that told me, and I love Fred, we're like brothers now, but that tells me there was a lot of years that he spent not training very efficiently. And there's so many guys, even at the pro level, and people think because they're ripped and huge, whatever, that they can't grow or get better. And it's a lot of guys haven't really milked everything they could out of their training or even their diet.
You know what Mark Lobliner said on this podcast like a couple months ago, and this was fascinating to me. He said that he's been training 20 years and he's put on 1 to 2 pounds of lean muscle mass a year to get to where he is. And I was like, wow, because all these guys, they want to hop on a 12-week cycle of steroids and put on 20 pounds. But he's saying it took him 10 years to put on 20 pounds. So that's a great perspective on, and it's so fucking true. And I didn't realize that even 10 years ago, but now looking back, I'm like, fuck, it's true. Because I look so much better now than I did 10 years ago.
Oh, dude, absolutely. I remember Dave Tate talking about how working his ass off for a whole year to put 5 pounds on his bench press.
You know another thing, Paul? And I don't think I've ever heard anyone talk about this besides myself. Training on gear and training naturally is completely different, right? Like when you're on gear, you can't have a bad workout. You feel like Superman. Your pumps are insane. Like you want to work out all day, right? I always tell people, start training naturally. Even like, let's say even someone wants to start training when they're 30, they have the money, they're old enough to use steroids. I say, start training naturally, because if you learn to love to train naturally, then when you finish your cycle and you're on PCT, you're going to keep training because you love training, right? I find a big mistake is that a lot of people, they start training while they're on gear. So they learn to love to train while they're on gear. And then once their cycle is over in their PCT, they don't feel the same. They don't have the same pumps, and they stop training. Their physique goes.
Here's the thing that comes back to people didn't get into training and learn to love training at its most organic state, right? That's what that is. They didn't learn to love training really, and again, I don't want to get too philosophical here, but like deep within their soul, right? I mean, training didn't provide a deeper meaning for them because it was attached to how they felt on gear. And when you actually go in and learn to love training and what it's doing, in that natural state, I really feel like that for the people who get hooked on it, there's usually a deeper meaning for it. A lot of us, especially as men, a lot of that comes back to our own insecurities that we had, and we gravitated towards training or building a better physique because of some type of insecurity that we were carrying around, or some way that we felt about who we were. I know that was the case for me, and I talked to thousands of guys over the years from, everything from they wanted to feel like they could, protect somebody better, or because they wanted to attract women or whatever. And then that evolves over the years for a lot of guys for different reasons. But especially for as men, we get in and we start training for reasons most of the time to feel better about who we are. So there's kind of this external armor that training that, building muscles that kind of gives us to make us feel protected against something that causes us either fear or trepidation in life, or, insecurity or whatever, a lack of confidence and all those kind of things. And so when you throw on gear, and like you're talking about, and gear makes you feel like you can just train all day. It doesn't for me anymore, because I just take replacement therapy at this point. So I just feel like a normal dude. But for those guys, when they first get on gear and then they have to cycle off, there's that big depression. And, you talk to a lot of guys about that, and then they come off gear, and then there's that big depression, and there's quote unquote no motivation to train and all that kind of stuff. So they didn't build that foundation of loving training for what it is.
Paul, I want to start to get into some of the listener questions, because we've got a lot of really good questions. I think you're going to like this question. I'm very interested to hear your answer on this. So Colleen asks, what's one of the most important mindset changes you've made over your lifetime, and why?
Training related or just life related?
She didn't specify, so either you pick.
Training related was easily the shift that I made a few years ago to put my health and wellness first, and all the research and everything that I did into that. Like I said, when I decided to come down from powerlifting and using big, heavy cycles for strength and stuff like that, was really putting my health and wellness first. And when I started coming across all of the problems related to chronic inflammation, it was just really eye-opening. And that became something I've written about a lot. That and gut health, fixing your gut for most people. Goodness gracious. Like I was sick all the time for years, and I would get every cold and flu and everything. And the last few years, I really started putting gut health at the forefront of my nutrition. And I actually did get the flu one time this past year, but it was the first time I've been sick in forever. And it used to be a problem all the time. So putting my gut health first, that was a big one. So eating a lot of fermented foods, doing a lot of fasting, taking care of inflammation, stuff like that. That was probably the biggest benefit, or the biggest change, the biggest paradigm shift that I've made in terms of training and nutrition. Goodness, I could go on forever about all the personal development that I've done as far as my life goes, and I've written about that a lot. I wouldn't even... probably potentially going back and kind of recapturing my faith. That's been a big change in my life the last few years, and growing there. And that's been big for me. And I always say that's probably the biggest change that I've had in my personal life as far as personal growth the last few years, that has helped keep me more grounded too.
I love that you brought up faith, and I agree with you completely there, Paul. I mean, if you have a strong faith, it really grounds you and it really calms you, because you realize what's important in life is your spirituality. it's a relationship with God and relationship with others, and you stop caring so much about what you see in the mirror, how much money you make, how many girls you can sleep with, right? Like you view all those things as just worldly things that aren't as important.
Yeah, it's funny that you hit on that, because that's a lot of what I've written about lately. And I talk to a lot of men. I actually work with a group of guys in a group that have like porn addiction problems. And I have a lot of guys that DM me about relationship problems, and a lot of guys that have, send me messages about stuff in places they're struggling in their own spiritual life. And that's, I feel like what's kind of evolved in my life with this whole thing is that God really put me in this position to kind of give testimony about a lot of the things that I've gone through in my own life, and a lot of the deep valleys that I've been in at times, and a lot of the dark waters that I was in. And when you're in those moments, it feels so permanent when you're there, when you're in the worst parts of your life and you feel like that, things are just never going to get better. And I was lucky enough that somebody really kind of helped me point my life back towards reclaiming my faith. And it's like you said, when you have that foundation, it's just unshakable, especially when you really wake up every day and work to make that a priority in your life. And I just feel like that this is where my life has been leading me. You wonder about all of the different trials and tribulations that you go through, and why people ask the question, why is this happening to me? And something I wrote this past week is I said, I believe that we'll stay in a valley, or we'll keep revisiting a valley until we learn what it is that God wants us to get out of those trials in our life. And that's the only way we'll find ourselves with the strength and the ability to navigate out of a deep personal valley and ascend from those places. And I feel like that I've had a pretty traumatic life at various times. My childhood was pretty atrocious. And I went through a lot of years where I had some terrible coping mechanisms and really lost my way as a man for a long time. And I lost pretty much everything that I loved from it. And you sit there, and I went through a terrible depression, and I've written about that. I've been very transparent and open with people about these things. And I feel like it's very important for us to give those things to one another as men and be vulnerable and talk about these struggles, because we're really suffering from depression right now. I mean, it's pretty bad. And but yeah, I just feel like most importantly, the personal part of my life, just finding my faith again, just working to get close with God again in my life has given me so much strength. And it just, not to be too cliche, it's just been a huge blessing.
So getting back into how to look better naked, Jason asks, I am about 11% body fat with 161 pounds body weight and am 5 feet 7 inches tall. I have a layer of fat covering my abs and hard to get rid of it. What's the most effective workout for it while following diet and without the use of any supplements?
There's the kind of going back and forth on spot reduction things. So one of the things that we do know about areas that tend to everybody carries body fat in some places a little more than others, right? Like we know that, right? Like when you're dieting and trying to get down lean, there's always that one place. And what I think there's a lack of blood flow to that area, which also tends to mean that you are probably not as muscularly developed in that particular area. Now, you guys think about this for a minute. Think about your own body. What is the most developed muscular area of your body? And more times than not, that area is going to be pretty lean too, compared to the rest of your body, right?
Yeah, 100%.
Right. Exactly. So there tends to be a high degree of blood flow in the areas where you're the most muscularly developed. And that means you're probably not going to have a high degree of fat accumulation there. So there's probably a little bit of truth that goes on in terms of spot reduction. But, some of the guys like to use some of those topical creams that they have now that create heat in certain areas. So for like love handles or, like belly fat or whatever, and just, brings a little bit more blood to that area. So if a guy's 11% body fat, but he knows he's carrying a little bit more body fat in certain areas, there's a lot of theories too that we carry body fat in certain areas more than others, and that it's hormonally related, but there's not a ton of data that kind of backs that up. So my personal theory is that it's probably more directly related to muscular development and blood flow, because that's when I ask the guys, like, what's your most developed body part area, or what's your most developed body part, without fail, they're almost always leaner there than everywhere else.
What are your thoughts on those like fat belts? Like, you see those people wear those like belts before doing cardio. Do you think?
Are you talking about those waist trainers?
Yeah. Those.
I think it's horrendous, man. I think so. When you put those on and it sucks everything in, then all those muscles, they don't get to shorten and lengthen. They don't get to become strong, and it can create, basically, if you have this core now that's not very strong, that everything in there is, doesn't get to work, and so it doesn't get to contract naturally. I think it's a very unnatural thing for guys to wear, and I think it can lead to injury, because now you're not going to be developing your trunk properly in your movements. And you think about it, everything starts there with where you're able to stabilize, whether you're squatting or deadlifting or even doing, an overhead press or even a barbell curl. If you're weak throughout what they call your core, or some people call it your trunk, that kind of puts you in a bad position. And the other thing a lot of guys don't think about is that strength or contractile energy or power is very synergistic, right? So, like, if I ask you, and I do this with guys when I teach at seminars, to shake a guy's hand but keep his body as relaxed as possible. When he shakes the guy's hand, I say, now squeeze his hand as hard as possible. Keep your whole body relaxed. And so he'll squeeze the guy's hand. Then I make him flex, like, his glutes, his traps, his abs, and everything, and then squeeze. And he can squeeze like 4 times harder. So there's a synergistic type thing that goes on with kinetic energy throughout the body. And so when you're taking an area that's short, tight, and weak like that, and you can't produce the kind of force to stabilize, which is what your trunk does, is help stabilize your lumbar spine, that doesn't seem like a very good idea. So I would stay away from waist trainers.
So we had another user question. They want to know, they said that one of their favorite YouTube celebrities or whatever is promoting weight belts, straps, wraps, knee wraps, basically all these accessory stuff, and they're also selling them on their website. And he wants to know, is all that shit necessary, or should I? He's new to training. He wants to know, should he invest a couple $100 in all that shit, or should he just lift raw in the gym?
No, I don't think if he's that new, like, that's kind of another problem we have with like social media and stuff. And I'm all for it, dude, making a buck, right? I'm not hating on anybody that has a product to sell, because everybody's got to feed themselves, and this is the way they do it. As long as it's legitimate, that's cool. But for a new guy that's coming in, honestly, one of the best things you can do is not buying that stuff. Get a good pair of shoes. I actually wear Sambas, but if you want to get a good pair of squat shoes, start there. But Sambas work well. Some people like Chucks. But no, you don't need knee wraps or knee sleeves or a belt. Honestly, right out of the gate at first, your body's designed to get stronger without, completely, bare ass naked if you want to.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, we got 2 more questions. So Edison asked 2 questions. Let me just pull them up here. Could he give his general thoughts and opinions regarding Arthur Jones style full body HIIT training? Has he tried it? If so, what kind of his results he experienced?
I never went through Arthur's actual programs, kind of like the ones that he put Casey on and stuff like that. I don't know that I ever followed those, because it would be something to the tune of like, God, it was a lot of movements like in one training session. But I followed some derivatives of it when I was younger and actually did really well with it. And actually, and Thibodeau and I talk about that, Thibodeau's big on neurotyping. I've always gravitated towards low volume, really high intensity work. So for me, those kind of workouts worked that was the staple of stuff that I did probably for the 20 years when I was natural, and still do a lot of that kind of stuff because it just really spoke to how I like to train. I have never used the Arthur's full body templates that he has out there, but again, I use a derivative of it that was written by Ellington Darden, who used a lot of Arthur's principles. And like I said, I did really well with them. So the best thing you can do is get out there and bust one out for a few months and see what you think. But the thing about those kind of routines, those are, I think, really good for natural guys to use growing, because man, they will make you hungry as hell, and they will actually force you to get in there and put some real work in.
I have a user question, and then I'll let Trevor ask his. This guy wants to know, can you ask the coach, what does he eat and drink pre-workout, specifically 1 to 2 hours prior, or does he ever train fasted?
Yeah, I train fasted pretty much every day. So I get up in the morning, and I actually lay all this out in the last book that I wrote, which is the Super Soldier Protocol. And I get up in the morning and I have coffee and I have exogenous ketones, and I really don't like to eat because the mental acuity in that state is really high, and I like to do a lot of my writing in the morning. So I will break my fast about 15 minutes before I start training with plasma, which is cyclic dextrin, and then I'll go right into training in that state. So I'm not really fasted when I'm training. I break my fast about 15 minutes before that. And then I use a plasma the whole time I'm training. And then after I'm done training, I'll have a shake. And usually it's either the metabolic drive or the MAG-10. And then my meals from there on out is I'll have my first real high carbohydrate meal after that, which will usually be anywhere from I call it high carbohydrate for me. It's anywhere from 60 to 100 grams of carbs in that meal, but then the rest of the day, it's mostly just fats and proteins. And then on non-training days, I'll always break my fast. So this has become my favorite meal lately, and it's 2 cups of egg whites, it's 20 almonds and 1 cup of blueberries, and I have a no-calorie syrup that I just smother, just drowning it in.
So on your training days, can you be specific as far as time? So you're waking up, you like to do your writing.
I get up.
When are you hitting the gym?
I get up. So I'll get up around 4 or 5 in the morning, and I'll start drinking my coffee. And I'm really big on what I call like having your white space first thing in the morning. So I don't get on my phone, I don't open my laptop. I'll get my coffee, and the first thing that I do is I give that time to God. So I do my devotional during that time, and then I have a journal that I write in. So I don't open any electronic equipment. I really believe it's big for so many people that they should be doing that. And it's not a time where you want to focus on your problems or your worries or whatever. It's a time where you want to give back to yourself. And I think that not enough people invest in themselves anymore and take care of themselves and their own, where their mind is at. And, that has a huge impact on your overall health, because the gut and the brain work on a bidirectional highway, more or less. So what I was talking about earlier, if you're taking care of your gut, it actually has an effect on your mood, your depression, how you're feeling, that kind of stuff. And then your brain, the state that you're in on the daily, has an effect on your gut health. So you got to take care of both. And it's why it's really important, and not enough people do it. Get up in the morning and spend some time, what I call like your quiet time, where you're giving back to yourself and you're recharging and you're starting in a good place for the day. And that's where I start. And then, like I said, I drink coffee and I have my ketones, and probably I don't really get hungry. I'll usually break my fast about 1 o'clock, about 1 p.m. But I'll do cardio in the morning, fasted, but I'll break the fast with the plasma. I go around 1 or 2 p.m. And then I'll train probably 45 minutes at the most. And from there, I'll eat. Right now I'm down to like 3 actual food meals a day and a shake more times than not. And then I stop eating most of the time around 8 or 9 o'clock at night.
But you're supposed to eat 8 meals a day. That's what the YouTube guys say. What's going on? No, what's funny is I'm just like you, and I won't eat anything till about 1, work out, then I'll eat. So we're kind of on the same thing. But I'm like you too. I also have a lot of muscle, so I don't have to. It's a different situation.
One thing I want to make clear to our listeners, though, is that both Paul and Steve have been training for 20 years and have built all their muscle and are not looking to build any more muscle. Paul,
Yeah, I'm literally not. Yeah, I don't care if I ever build another ounce of muscle in my life.
Exactly. But when you were coming up the ranks, and part of my language, and you're basically trying to become a big motherfucker, you did not fast for 8 hours in the morning. You woke up, you probably pounded a shake as soon as you got out of bed, right?
Well, during the years I was really trying to gain mass, I did that thing where you actually wake up in the middle of the night and like eat food. Okay, I'll tell you this because you guys laugh at this. When I was trying, and this is not like something I would recommend to anybody, but I had terrible insomnia for most of my life, and I kind of fixed that too. But when I was younger and I had my insomnia, I would literally eat every 2 hours for 24, 26 hours the whole time I was awake, and eat every 2 hours during those 24 hours. Just to keep calories. So you didn't have like 8 hours or 9 hours where you're sleeping with no calories coming in. I had calories coming in round the clock. But I don't advise doing that either. But my point is, you're correct. If you're trying to grow, don't do fasting because you're missing out on time you could be eating.
Good. I like that you said that because like I am for fasting. I think it's great. I totally 100% agree with you on the mental acuity, the mental clarity, but so many times I get, young 18-year-old guys sending me DMs on Instagram. They're trying to build muscle. They hear Steve doing, these 19-day water fasts. And I'm like, whoa. Steve is in a
what's crazy? I do a 60-hour fast once a month where we use ketones and bone broth, stuff like that. And there's people freaking out like, oh, I could never go 60 hours. So I'm like, well, man, you guys are on the low rung of the totem pole as far as the species go. Because, how did we as humans make it all these years without having a Cinnabon and a McDonald's on every other corner?
My neighbor every 2 hours gets in his car and drives to KFC or to sub shop. I swear to God. And he's like, Steve, I'm trying to lose weight. I'm like, dude, I watch you get in your car every 2 hours. I hear you turn on your ignition and drive. And he always comes back with KFC. I'm like, dude, don't you see what's going on? You're like 150 pounds overweight. I mean, there's something connected.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Now, here's the thing that a lot of guys don't understand. I still recommend guys that are trying to gain weight to potentially do like a 24-hour fast once a month to bring their blood pressure down, to give their digestive system a chance to rest, to bring blood glucose down, to kind of create that insulin sensitivity again, to reduce oxidative stress. Once a month for 24 hours, you're not going to lose any muscle, and it's going to keep your body healthy, for the long run too, while you're trying to do this. It's a good idea.
Steve, one thing you told me I'm never going to forget is that we were going to record a podcast, and I basically said, hey, Steve, give me 10 minutes. I've been running around all day. I haven't eaten anything all day. Like I'm starving. Steve was like, bro, I did a 19-day water fast. You're going to live, I promise.
Yeah,
you're still here. It's true.
Okay, I got one more question for you, Paul. So Edward Harrison asks, and this is a pretty unconventional question. I would like to hear his top 5 non-training related book recommendations, either fiction or nonfiction. I'll give you the first one, the Bible.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, you go with the Word of God, number 1. Number 2 would be Wild at Heart by John Eldridge. I would also go with, this is going to come out of left field, In Cold Blood by Truman Capote. That was one of my all-time favorites. After that, I would probably, I'm trying to think here. Okay, this one is another going to be out of left field. Would be The Game. Gosh, and I can't remember his name right now. You guys probably know what I'm talking about, though. It was about the guy that got involved in the pickup artist stuff years ago. And what he figured out by the end of it, when he met his wife, was none of all that shit that he learned about using to work on women actually ended up working on a woman who was very secure in who she was. And she ended up telling him, she's like, whenever you get tired of trying to do this bullshit, she's like, you come talk to me. So he actually had to learn who he was and develop who he was genuinely. It's a very cool read, and it takes kind of a different approach than you think it's going to take throughout the book. And I think it's good for men to actually see that and hear that you have to put in some time cultivating and developing who you are genuinely. If you want to connect with people on a very real level and resonate with them in a way that they can identify with. For the fifth book, which the one I'm reading right now? It's actually, I just finished Love and War by John Eldridge and gave it away. And the last one would be The Way of the Superior Man by David Dieta.
Any good fitness books that you can recommend?
Dude,
Feel free to plug your own books there, Paul.
Yeah, that's pretty much a thing to plug. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've written several. When I was powerlifting, it was base building, which was all the principles that I ended up developing in my own training that got me to the strongest that I was ever at, which I was just okay at powerlifting. It's funny, I look back now that I don't care about strength, and I look back now at some of my lifts, I go, I was really, really freaking strong. But at the time when I was in it, I was comparing myself to the best guys in the world, so I didn't feel very strong. But base building was my strength building one. The last one I did was the Super Soldier Protocol. My first actual real training book was Strength Life Legacy, but there's a lot of stuff in there that I wouldn't agree with now, which is good, though. That's good because it means I'm not dogmatic and open-minded and I'm still learning.
You want to know a book I just finished writing and that my graphic designer is currently editing for me?
What's that?
This is something I never thought I'd write a book on, how to do injections. Because this is something I see so many people constantly screw up. So I'm fed up with this. So I did all the different injection sites. I have photos on where you stick the needle, what size needles to use, everything. Just because I can't believe how many people screw up something so simple.
Yeah, I would just tell everybody, don't ever try to stick yourself with an 18 gauge needle. Just start there and work your way down to bigger numbers.
Well, it's kind of counterintuitive, right? You would kind of think the opposite. I've gotten so many emails from guys that were withdrawing with the 25 gauge and then injecting with the 18. And they're like,
oh my gosh. Oh, dude. I can't even imagine. I'm just yeah, I'm not getting a shot this week if I don't have a 22 or a 25.
Or they inject in a vein. They think you're supposed to inject in a vein like they're injecting.
Yeah, that's a good place to start too. Don't inject into a vein.
They think they're drawing blood or something.
Yeah, learn to aspirate. You're not a heroin addict, bro. You're injecting some gear.
I've gotten another thing. You want to this one's really funny. So I had a listener question and they're like, so I'm reconstituting peptides. I use sterile water, right? I was like, yep. And they're like, it feels like kind of a waste though. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, well, it's all that water for a little peptide vial. I'm like, what are you talking about, man? You buy Bacchusteric water, it's like 10 or 30 milliliters.
Wait, hold on. I know where you're going with this. I already know where you're going with this. He was putting the whole vial of water in. No,
he went to Walmart and bought distilled water that you would drink with or put in an iron. He bought a 4-liter water jug from Walmart.
Dude.
I'm just happy he didn't get an infection.
Yeah. Oh, dude, it's funny, man. I have to remind myself every once in a while because I'm very self-taught. I have a 9th grade education, and I'm very self-taught, and I spend an inordinate amount of time reading. A lot of times, 16 hours a day I spend researching something I consider kind of, minute. And then I forget, 99% of the guys are just winging shit all the time. They're not paying attention to the details. And I said earlier, don't worry about the little details. But I'm saying, and when we're talking about anytime you're putting something in your body like that, you want to really know what the hell you're doing. You want to spend some time researching that.
I'm the same way, Paul. If I was going to do an injection, I would go to the library. I'd rent out, 5 different nurse textbooks on how to do injections. I would call a 1-800 helpline, make sure I got everything right. But yeah, I mean, a lot of people, one of their buddies tell them something like, okay, seems simple enough.
Dude, I remember everybody remembers their first time, like getting your cherry popped, right? Like everybody remembers their first injection. Dude, I remember shaking so bad. Like it was a glute injection. I remember shaking so bad. Like I just like, there's no way I can do this. And now you just don't even think about it.
So Paul, for our listeners, how can they get to know you? If they want to purchase some of your books, where would they be able to do that? Are you currently taking clients? Let's plug your services.
Yes, I'm actually going to kick off an 8-week recomp program again here in a couple of weeks. I do that every so often for guys who maybe they don't want to commit to a full year. And sometimes I don't like to commit to everybody for a full 6 months or a year either, but I like to help guys get moving in the right direction. And I usually do 8 or 10 week recomps for a lot of guys to kind of give them that foundation that we talked about. And I really like that because it gives them a chance to kind of dig in for a while and see some good results and understand, the basics of everything. And then they usually come back later. So I have an 8-week recomp that I'm going to kick off soon. Pretty much you can find my books if you go out to lift-run-bang.com and look under electronic books. All my books are listed there. You can find them on Amazon. Pretty much, I'm kind of low key. Like I still have the blog. I haven't even ever had a website developed, which I need to do one day. But my whole thing is writing, and it's you would think with me being a computer engineer for 15 years that I'd be all high tech with all of that stuff, but I'm really not. I'm pretty low drag.
I'm the same way, man. If you want a really good IT guy, let me know and I can give you a contact. He is out of Virginia. He did my entire website for $60 American.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll be talking, man. We'll be talking.
Dude, and he set up, I have a newsletter he set up. He set a store that goes directly to my PayPal account. Like, he's the man.
Awesome. Well, I will hit you up. I'll give you guys his Tibbs information, and you can give me that guy's information.
Cool. Yeah, Christian Thibodeau would be another really good guest to get on the podcast.
Absolutely. Tibbs won't shut up, man. Once he gets going, you can't get him to shut up. So if you throw a question at him, just be prepared to sit back for the next 37 minutes and just listen at him run his fat Canadian mouth.
I'll let him know you said that.
That's
for your
good.
host, Trevor, for my co-host, Steve Smee, and for our special guest, Coach Paul Carter, this has been another episode of Evolutionary Radio. Live your life, look good doing it. Thanks for listening. Peace.